Hamish de Bretton-Gordon is a retired British Army colonel, former commander of NATO's and UK's chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear reaction troops. Welcome to our program, Colonel Hamish.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Let's begin our interview with breaking news. Ukraine has struck Kerch Bridge with underwater explosive, according to the Ukrainian security services. What is your reaction to this? Another attack of Ukraine on the Kursk, on the Kerch Bridge?
Well, I think, first of all, those of us observers outside Ukraine have been expecting or surprised that the Kerch Bridge hasn't been attacked before. Obviously, some time ago it was, and that had an impact. But the Ukraine Security Service, the SBU, seems to have been very active recently, conducting some extraordinary audacious attacks. And I think this, although the full detail of what's happened and the damage done to the Kerch Bridge is not yet known, but yet again it is showing that Ukraine and Ukraine Secret Service seems to be able to attack Russian military assets, Russian sites, almost at will. And I think it is really, almost the last few days are a key turning point, perhaps, in this conflict, where Russia now knows that its strategic assets, even some of them maybe many thousands of miles from Ukraine, are not within striking of Ukraine. And I think the symbolism of attacking the Kerch Bridge will resonate across Russia, and will be yet something else that Putin is going to have to explain, because no doubt many Russians are going to Crimea for their summer holidays because they're can't go anywhere else. And with the Kerch Bridge under attack, then even that is going to be curtailed to them. So I personally think it's a very smart move by the Ukrainian Secret Service, and along with all the other attacks they've been doing recently, should have a strategic impact, hopefully, on this war.
Let's cover also another Ukrainian attack on Russia. Ukraine hit 41 Russian bombers in the airfields of the Russian strategic aviation. Moreover, as a result of this attack, at least 13 Russian bombers were fully destroyed by the security service of Ukraine. What is your assessment of this interesting tactics, interesting operations involving trucks, drones, and Russia's strategic airfields?
Well, I think this is an extraordinary operation that has resonated around the world. It is one of the most incredibly audacious and clever attacks that really one has seen, in generations. Its complexity, it's not dissimilar to the Israeli Secret Service, attacking the terrorists of Hezbollah by blowing up their pager radios. This attack was obviously planned in great detail. We understand it's been, in the planning stage for well over a year. The ability to get deep into Russia, one of these airfields is many thousands of kilometers from the Ukraine border, and the clever way that it's been put together, the ability to get trucks with these drones, FPV attack drones, into a position just a few kilometers from their intended attack site is remarkable. I mean, one of the second order consequences is that virtually every large lorry in Russia is now being searched, and there are about 5 million of them, so that has had a profound effect. But the ability, I think, to strike, one of Russia's key strategic military assets, these long-range bombers, that these are the ones who are launching the cruise missiles and hypersonic missiles that have been attacking Ukraine civilian targets like hospitals and schools, for the last few months. And it would appear that at least 30% of this capability has now either been destroyed or is out of commission for a long, long time. $7 billion worth of damage. It's extraordinary. I think the other thing that is fascinating, is very important, is the Russian propaganda spin machine is almost tearing itself to pieces, because there is no way that even the Russian disinformation network can really show this to the Russian public as anything but an absolute disaster. And the fact that it's also clear that there are many Russians who are helping out for these attacks on the Russian state. And if rumors are to be believed in Moscow and elsewhere, people are beginning to get very disgruntled. And there is no way that that the general population, the rank and file in Russia, who are suffering because they can barely afford to eat, there is no way that they can dismiss this. So I think this attack by the SBU, as we understand it, is pivotal. Allied to that, this weekend, we also understand that a number of railway bridges and the railway network in Western Russia has also been attacked. I'm not sure that the Ukraine military or the Ukraine security services have claimed responsibility for this, but again, it's had a profound effect. And again, it's making it very aware to the Russian people that things are not going well. And that's why I think it is so crucial. And if what is coming out today or at the moment about the attack on the Kerch Bridge, you can see that Russia is very much on the back foot here. So, yeah, I think great praise for the Ukrainian Secret Service.
From your perspective, what does Vladimir Putin feel about these attacks on Russia's strategic aviation? Do you see this as a major humiliation for Vladimir Putin? Because Russian destroyed aircraft, for example, Tu-95. This aircraft is no longer in production in Russia, so Moscow cannot replace these planes with other new ones. How do you feel the Putin's reaction to this? What does he think about it right now?
Well, I think Putin must be absolutely humiliated. As you say, these planes, even if Russia could rebuild them, they will take a heck of a long time. And the fact that some of them are out of production, and the fact that Putin and his advisors have been lauding how brilliant these weapons are, and of course they have moved them far away from the Ukraine border because they thought they were untouchable. Now nothing is untouchable in Russia, and the second order issues that poses to the Russian military are very, very large. So yeah, I think Putin's humiliated, and we'll come on to it, I know, but the first reaction was, I think, probably at the negotiation table in Istanbul yesterday, where the Russian delegation put a ridiculous peace plan on the table for discussion, which really showed, how desperate the Russians must be, and Putin is really running out of road here. And let's hope, when we look at other things like the oil price crashing down below $50 a barrel, a lot is going very badly for Putin at the moment, and let's hope that continues.
And also, how do you see the main consequences of this Ukrainian attack on Russian strategic aviation for Russia's nuclear deterrence?
Well, this is another issue of great significance. It is these aeroplanes that carry the Russian tactical nuclear missiles, which Putin and his advisors have been threatening threatening Ukraine with, and even threatening Britain with frequently recently. It now makes it much, much more difficult for Putin to use his tactical nuclear capability with so many of his aircraft destroyed and unusable. So I think, again, it's taking another key weapon out of Putin's arsenal, which he has used to threaten the West, and actually, I think it's worked with a lot of European countries until recently have been terrified whenever Putin threatens tactical nuclear weapons. But actually now I think people can realize that, a lot of his capability to launch them has been destroyed. And we see that across Europe with a lot of European countries now rearming, spending a lot of money on defense, and really at last showing Putin that Europe is serious in its defense and serious in its support to Ukraine.
In our previous conversation, we discussed some people in the Kremlin who could be unpleasant, and also who could not support Putin's regime, who could be unhappy about this war. Do you feel that recent attacks of Ukraine, these attacks on Russia's strategic assets, could even make these people more unhappy about Putin's regime, and could make Russian generals more unhappy about Putin's rule and this probably biggest military disaster and military humiliation for Russia?
Yes, I think it does. I mean, there are lots of rumors, and we've discussed it before, of a lot of discontent in and around the Kremlin. And it's thought that SBU have assassinated several Russian generals in the Kremlin and elsewhere. And these people now seeing, the disaster that happened with the SBU attacks over the weekend, I am sure that discontent will only grow. And, Putin seems to be reinforcing failure at the moment. And Russian dictators who fail rarely stay in post for long. And the fact that, as I said earlier on, the Russian propaganda machine is really not making any headway at all, not making any sense at all. And one does get the feeling that the walls are closing in on Putin, and no doubt there will be several people in the Kremlin who would very happily replace him and then perhaps start again. So yeah, I don't think Putin can afford many more errors and many more disasters like the Russian military has suffered this last weekend.
Do you feel that these attacks deep inside Russia could become another turning point of this war, and could help Ukraine to turn the tide and force Putin to make any kind of concessions?
Well, certainly that is what one hopes. And if we were dealing with a rational leader like Putin, that is what would come to fruition. Unfortunately, we know that Putin is an autocratic dictator, and I expect his own self-preservation is higher than his desire to do the right thing. I mean, it's clear. One of the elements is where was all the air defense protecting these important jets? Well, we know that Putin has removed a lot from the front line to protect himself and his own palaces rather than protect key assets. So yeah, I stand by. I think this is a key moment in this war, and if the SBU and the Ukrainian military and Ukrainian president can keep up the pressure, and if Europe can really get behind Ukraine, and hopefully, I mean, the one variable that is so variable that it's a bit of a worry is President Trump. We haven't really heard anything coming out of Trump in the last couple of days. And if he keeps supporting and throwing his weight behind Ukraine, yeah, all of this could be enough to tip the balance. And hopefully, as everybody wants, the Russians coming to the ceasefire table with a proper and realistic plan for peace that gives Ukraine a just peace and a peace and a ceasefire deal that the Ukrainian people can accept.
You just mentioned about the position of US President Donald Trump. Trump has not yet commented on these attacks of Ukraine deep inside Russia. However, we know that he has been saying that Ukraine, quote, doesn't have the cards. Don't you think that now this is a moment when he could realize that President Zelensky and Ukraine do have the cards to actually have an upper hand in this war, to prevail in this conflict?
Yes, I think absolutely. Even Trump cannot dismiss this as anything but a huge strategic success for Ukraine. Now, it is clear that President Trump, does not necessarily go into the detail of these things and doesn't understand it. It's pretty clear as well that Ukraine's military operational security, as we call it, has been absolutely excellent. Obviously the Russians had no idea this was happening, and it seems pretty clear the Americans didn't either. So it is a demonstration, I think, very clearly to President Trump and the Americans that Ukraine does have the ability. Ukraine can move forward and can defeat and push the Russians out of Ukraine, if they are given all the resources that they need to do it. So let's hope that President Trump is clever enough to realize this and clever enough to know which is the side to back, and obviously gives Ukraine all the support they need in order to prevail, in order to get the Russians to the ceasefire table, to get a just ceasefire and peace for the Ukrainian people.
Do you feel that this Ukrainian attacks deep inside Russia also bring US President Donald Trump closer to imposing sanctions against Russian economy?
Well, let us hope so, because Trump alone has the ability to really turn the screw on the Russian economy, and sanctions, particularly against the oil industry. If Russia cannot sell its oil, number one, and if it can't sell its oil above $50 a barrel, its economy is going to grind to a halt pretty quickly, and its war machine is going to grind to a halt pretty quickly. This is all within the gift of President Trump, and let's hope that he now realizes that that's the case and does the right thing.
Let's cover also recent developments inside Russia. The CEO, retired Russian army major who was in charge of capturing the Ukrainian city of Mariupol, was killed in an explosion in Russia last week. He died as a result of explosion of a suicide bomber who was also serving in Russian police. What could this mean?
Well, it's very difficult to say without the full details. But again, this does seem like another key Russian military figure who has been assassinated, killed, however way you want to dress it up. It is strange that it's a suicide bomber that's done it. That it would suggest that it is more a disgruntled Russian than perhaps something sponsored by the Ukraine Secret Service. But yet again, it puts another nail in the Russian coffin that none of its key commanders are safe. Those who have committed atrocities against Ukraine people, again, get their just desserts, whatever ways. And if this happens to be a Russian soldier who's done it, then that, I think, indicates quite how desperate morale is within the Russian army, and leads me to really agree what I said to you last time we spoke, that I think the Russian army is reaching its culminating point. It's running out of steam, which is why it's so important that we in the West give everything we can to Ukraine to make sure that they can push the Russians over the line to come and discuss a proper and just peace deal with the Ukrainian negotiators.
It is also interesting that this suicide bomber was serving in Russian police. Could this indicate another unpleasant moments in the Russian society, this dissatisfaction of Russian regime, and could this also fuel another, for example, coup in Russia, so-called Prigozhin-style march in Moscow, or any other conflict inside regime?
Well, I think it's probably too early to say on this particular thing, but it is certainly the case, and the rumors are getting stronger and stronger, that there's a lot of discontent within the Russian military, the Russian police, and the rank and file Russian civilians who are suffering a heck of a lot more than Putin and his henchmen. And if this activity continues, then the rumors will continue as well. So I think Putin this week is in a very precarious position. In fact, more precarious than he's been for the last 3 years. And let's hope he realizes that. And as far as Ukraine and the West is concerned, he can get out of this by negotiating a just peace plan with the Ukrainian government.
You just mentioned about the Putin's way out of this war. It seems like Vladimir Putin faces stalemate situation. He's in difficult situation because on one hand, if he continues the war against Ukraine, then there would be another attack deep inside Russia on Russian strategic assets and on Russian key military facilities. On the other hand, if he agrees with ceasefire proposals, then Russian hardliners could topple his regime. Do you feel that Vladimir Putin has this chance to have a way out of this difficult situation? Only he is responsible for this, where he is right now.
Well, as you say, it is a complex and difficult situation, and Putin has brought it on himself. It's, for normal democratic peoples like Ukraine and Britain, it would seem straightforward. He would negotiate a ceasefire, and that would be it. However, this is Russia, and he is a dictator who no doubt has created enemies, and he has created a disaster for Russia. So he probably expects that if he goes for a ceasefire now, then many of those hardliners close to him will see him as a failure and that he's capitulated and will remove him. So we're in a really tense time at the moment, but it's key that Ukraine and its Western allies show a very committed and unified position to force the Russians to the negotiation table. And I'm sure, as far as we're concerned, if Putin keeps going or not is of no concern. What is important is the war ends as soon as possible and creates a just peace for Ukraine.
Also, according to Bloomberg, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin is confident that his army would be able to break through Ukrainian defense lines and capture whole 4 Ukrainian regions until the end of this year. What is your assessment of this unrealistic objective of Putin's war machine?
Well, I think it is unrealistic. The lines on the contact line, 800 meters or so long, have moved very, very little in the last year. In fact, last 18 months, the only major incursion was by Ukraine forces in the Kursk region back last summer. So, I don't think there is any prospect that Russian ground forces are going to make any great gains into Ukraine. And let's hope that the Russians realize that, because this ridiculous war is just killing more and more people every day, and everybody in the world seems to want peace except Putin and his close advisors. And let's hope that the majority of the Russians realize this, and we can get a ceasefire and peace deal, as soon as possible to prevent the killing and try and enable Ukraine to get back on its feet. And let's not forget, everybody mustn't forget, that it's Russia that was the aggressor. Russia invaded Ukraine, and it needs to get out, and it then needs to pay recompense for all the damage that's been done.
Let's also cover UK nuclear deterrence and the new news developments regarding the UK's defense. According to the British media, UK fighter jets could soon carry nuclear bombs, tactical nuclear weapons, for the first time of the history. What is your reaction, your assessment of this new defense plans of the UK government regarding the usage of tactical nuclear weapons, as you just proposed in your recent articles?
Well, I think this comes out of the UK Strategic Defence Review, which was announced yesterday. I personally think it is absolutely the right move. When Putin looks at Europe and looks at the nuclear deterrent, he doesn't see a lot of tactical nuclear weapons, and certainly Britain has got no tactical nuclear weapons. Putin assumes that if he used a tactical nuclear weapon against Ukraine, Britain is not going to start Armageddon, if you like, start a global nuclear war by firing a nuclear ballistic missile. And he's probably right. But Britain gave up its tactical nuclear weapons bizarrely in 1997, the same year that Ukraine signed the Budapest Treaty, which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in return for assurance of security from the Russians, the Americans, and the Brits. So I think this is a really good move, and I hope it happens sooner rather than later.
Also, British government plans to build another 12 submarines in response to the rising threats around the globe, and also in response to the threats posed by Russia. What is your take on such plans of British government, and do you expect these plans to be implemented soon?
It's a key part of the UK's strategic defence review. I think it makes a lot of sense. These nuclear submarines hold Britain's cruise missiles and hypersonic missiles. These have proved to be very effective in the Ukraine war. So it makes a lot of sense. The challenge with Britain's new defence review is that a lot of these capabilities, are not going to be in position for 10 years or so. And actually, what we need is capability now, so that it's a deterrence now against Putin, because that's really what the UK defence restructuring is all focusing on. So the kit is absolutely as it should be. Whether the British government is prepared to spend the money on it, that is another issue. But I think most people have welcomed, certainly in the UK, the defence review, which was announced yesterday.
And also the last question for you regarding the military-industrial base of the United Kingdom. UK Defence Minister announced the new investment in the increasing production of military equipment in the UK. 1.5 billion pounds would be invested in this area to increase production of weaponry in the United Kingdom. What is your assessment of this another step to make the United Kingdom more safe place to live and to deter Russia from another attack against the European state?
I think this is another sensible move by the British government, another lesson being learned from Ukraine, that you need to be able to produce domestically enough ammunition and missiles of yourself in order to maintain conflict against somebody like Russia. And if the Russians look and see that Britain has all this capability, then it provides extra deterrence. So and also the government will say it's good for British prosperity and to grow the British economy. British defence industry is a very major part of the British economy. So again, I think this is a good thing and to be applauded.
Thank you, Colonel Hamish, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you very much for having me, Daniel.